such as the future balance of power in Asia, and indeed the world as a whole. Mao, the affable host, refused to be drawn in and insisted on speaking in vague generalities. They parted, with more polite words, both apparently expecting that they would meet again in a few days. They did not, in fact, meet again that time, although they would on Nixon's subsequent visits to China. International relations are about treaties, arms control, economic structures, courts, and bilateral and multilateral deals. But they also involve gestures, exchanges of ambassadors, public statements, state visits. All of these indicate the ways in which nations see themselves and how they see others. The meeting itself and Nixon's week in China that followed were partly about confirming what had already been negotiated. But they were also intended to underscore that there was a new era in the long and often stormy relationship between China and the United States, and indeed between Asia and the West. The visit shook American allies such as Japan and Taiwan. It infuriated China's few friends in the world, and it worried the Soviet Union. We have been debating exactly what it really meant ever since. The relationship between China and the West, and more specifically between China and the United States, has seen many stages. Long before the 13 colonies revolted against the British Empire, China had had indirect contact with the West in the shape of trade through Central Asia with the Roman Empire. In Europe's Middle Ages, a few brave or foolhardy travelers, Marco Polo among them, had managed to survive the overland route and see China for themselves. Later still, Jesuit missionaries had gone to China to convert the Chinese court to Catholicism, only to end up becoming quite Confucian in their outlook. They were followed by traders, impertinent bandits, in the Chinese point of view, who clustered around the south coast of China to buy its silks, teas, and porcelains, and eventually to sell the Chinese opium in return. American traders joined in enthusiastically, and missionaries, among them many Americans, arrived to save Chinese souls. Until the start of the 19th century, the Chinese dealt with Westerners, to their own satisfaction at least, as inferiors, who were fortunate if they even had contact with the Middle Kingdom, the name the Chinese used for themselves, if they even enjoyed the Middle Kingdom's superior products. That calm assumption of superiority was shaken and then shattered, although perhaps not irrevocably, when Western powers, strengthened by the products of the Industrial Revolution, forced their way into China and, in the end, helped destroy the old order. By the end of the 19th century, the ruling dynasty was on the point of collapse, and China itself appeared to be on the edge of disappearing into one empire or another. The United States had been part of that sorry story, but it had sometimes shown itself to be friendly. It had supported the continuation of a Chinese state. American missionaries, who were actively founding schools and hospitals, provided a growing constituency of support back home for a beleaguered China. There were other views of China in the United States, though. From the repository of the wisdom of the ages to the yellow peril, or the source of powerful Oriental plots to overthrow American power and the American way of life. American attitudes to China continue to this day to oscillate between those two poles of fascination and sympathy, on the one hand, and fear and repugnance on the other. Chinese attitudes have gone through similar evolutions, from suspicion and hostility to an admiration for American values such as democracy. The United States was China's ally during the Second World War, fighting against Japan, which had occupied much of China. As the war ended, though, the United States slid from backing China to backing one faction, the Kuomintang, against another, the Chinese Communists. When the Communists won the Civil War in 1949, they had every reason to fear and hate the Americans. That became open hostility during the Korean War.